Hello, welcome to Stats with Warnke. This will be the conclusion to our 3.1 notes. This is going to be correlation. So what we have been looking at is a scatter plot. A scatter plot is that x and y axis where we look at two variables and we can identify the relationship between them. So what we're trying to look for is a linear or nonlinear relationship. That's part of the associations that we're looking for, as well as strength direction. And so estimating with our eyes is not always the best way to go because things that look linear or look nonlinear can often resemble one another, and uh, especially when you get closer to smaller and weaker correlation values, it can get very difficult to determine is something a line or not. So we have a measurement that we will use called correlation, and we use that abbreviation as the letter R. So in a computer output that we're going to start to see relatively soon, or in your calculator when you run our stats diagnostics, you'll see R pop up, and that is correlation. What that does for us is that identifies the direction, so either positive or negative. Again, think of it a little bit like slope. So if it's a positive number, that's going to be a positive slope. A negative number corresponds to a negative overall slope in the data points. And a strength. R is always going to be between positive 1 and negative 1. The closer that R is to positive 1, the closer it is to a perfectly straight positive line. The closer R is to negative 1, the closer it is to a perfectly straight negative line. We have values of R that are close to 0 are going to be very weak linear relationships. So the closer it is to 0, it's going to look like just a random cloud of data, just random scatter across our canvas. The strength, as it moves closer towards either end, becomes a lot easier to judge and assess, and then extreme values only occur in kind of perfect linear relationships. Here are some examples of some different correlations that you might see. So on that first one, that upper right hand side, actually, sorry, upper left hand side, you see correlation equals 0. And so it's just kind of a random cloud. You can't really tell as you go from left to right. Is that a positive cloud or a negative cloud? Our small r value, so that middle one in the top, is negative zero point 0.3. Again, it's not much better. The closer it is to 0, the smaller it is. It's very difficult to determine. In that case, you can see a little bit of a trend negative as you look from left to right. But as it gets stronger, so r equals zero point 0.5 in that top left-hand corner, top right-hand corner, you can see that that trend is more clearly defined as positive. As you move to the bottom left-hand side, you can see that that is more clearly negative as you get stronger and stronger. So that's 0.7. That's getting closer to that negative 1. It's a more clearly defined negative linear relationship. 0.9 in the middle there on the bottom is more clearly a positive linear relationship. And then when you get to negative 0.99 there on that bottom and right hand side, that is very, very clearly a linear relationship. So this is the mental picture I want you to have as you're assessing the linearity and the strength of that relationship. So as something is very close to a negative 1, that would be a strong negative line. As you get closer to 0, it reduces down to moderate and then weak. So that'd be like a weak negative or a moderately weak negative, for example. And then the closer you get to weak, the closer you get to 0, it just looks like random scatter. So those R values that were like 0.3 and 0.5, those are just kind of clouds that are a little more difficult to assess. And then as you get stronger again, as you get closer to positive 1, that becomes more clearly a linear relationship. Here are some examples of just some different scatter plots that you might see. So we have 4 different scatter plots and 4 different correlations. Take a second here and try to match each of those values with each of those scatter plots. Now that you've taken care of that, I'm going to put up my answers here. So 0.91, that's going to be usually the easiest to identify. It's something that's going to be a strong positive linear relationship. It's going to be relatively close together. So I'm going to put that with this one in the upper left-hand corner. Then I'll look for, again, negative 0.85. That one's going to be a pretty clear negative relationship, negative association. So as I look from left to right, that is very clearly decreasing. and that cloud is a little more scattered than it was for 0.91, but it's still relatively clear which direction that one's going. These two are both like a little more challenging, so 0.62, looking for something that's pretty clearly positive, so that's going to be down here in the bottom left, and then negative 0.07. So since that's so close to zero, we're looking for something that's just basically completely randomly scattered. So I'm going to set it right there. And those are the solutions. That is the end of the Chapter 3, Section 1 notes. Hope you guys have a wonderful day.